Yeah. So, well, I wrote the holding off as drug-induced psychosis. I was like, whoa, I was so high. I thought I was talking to God. That's crazy. And I just kept using because that's all that I knew to do. All I knew to do was just use drugs. So I kept trying to live my life that way. And everything in the universe was blocking me. Everything. So like all of these divine synchronicities started happening to get me onto a different path. My path became so narrow. There was no way for me to deter. Yeah.
Today, I'd like to welcome Betty Guadagno to the show. Betty, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
Yes, I am especially excited to have this conversation with you because what I've seen of your story overlaps significantly with mine. And I love how recovery and addiction are so part of your spiritual awakening, just like they were mine. So, with all that being said, let's get started with what it was like and what happened.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I love that we have all these similarities. It makes me feel so connected, right? Like essentially we're strangers, but we have these parallels to our stories. And I think all of humanity, we all have a parallel to our story in the fact that we're having a human experience. But this is very significant because it's very specific. And I love that. So I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, a near-death-like experience in March of 2019, actually on March 23rd, which is the beginning of the season of Aries, which is the symbol of rebirth. And that's exactly what happened to me. A complete and utter transformation, 180 degrees. It was onset by a drug overdose. I had taken, I had a very long drug-a-log that I did every day. And every day I was taking multiple substances in very high quantities. And this particular day, I had to go do my laundry. And I thought, I might as well take a little extra just for fun to be wavy. And I ended up having this spontaneous awakening that completely metamorphosized my life. So I'll take you through what that was like. So a Kundalini awakening, some people don't know what the word Kundalini means. I didn't. And now I do. Kundalini roughly translates into life force. So I had a life force energy activation awakening. All of my chakra systems, which every spiritual body has 7 on the earthly plane, every single one of them was opened, activated, and put online at the exact same moment. And I had a rush of energy going up and down my body as this was happening. When my third eye and my crown got hit with the rush of energy, it felt like my crown chakra opened and my spirit shot out of my body and started to travel into the space of eternity. The first experience that I had was somewhat of a life review. So in my life, because I was immersed in addiction, there's a lot of things that go along with that. I come from a family of addicts. My whole family is very impoverished. There's lots of different kinds of trauma in our household: sexual trauma, emotional trauma, physical trauma, all the traumas. And so I started to experience all of those things in my life review. And I was not only experiencing it from my point of view, but I was also experiencing it from the other person's point of view. And I'm not just a traumatized person. I'm also a traumatized person who inflicted lots of trauma. Okay. I became a perpetrator at some point in my story, all the way 100%. So I started to experience all the harm that I had caused other people and to feel what it felt like for them to be part of my wrath of destruction. And it was so overwhelming. I also experienced the death of my parents. In 2007, my parents were both strung out on drugs and they intentionally overdosed together. They committed suicide. And so I started to experience in my life review not only the perception of the suicide from a grieving daughter, but I also felt it from their experience. And I cannot even explain in words to you the ocean of anguish that I was drowning in when I felt this experience from their point of view. It felt like every cell in my body was spiky and full of static and was weighted in cement. And it felt a lot like what I imagine people to describe hell to feel like. That was what this experience felt like for me. And I thought, oh my God, that's it. I died and I'm in hell. And this is where I am now. This is crazy. And I started hearing these benevolent voices. They were masculine voices. The first voice that I encountered was my divine masculine energy and presented himself that way to me. Then the masculine voice transferred into every masculine energy I've ever been around. So my father's voice was there. And I also had a boyfriend who had recently passed away. He was there as well. And their voices were ringing out to me saying, you are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe. And I started to follow their voices and I started to be lifted up into their voices. And that's when I found myself on the journey to what I perceive was heaven, or the laboratory before heaven is kind of what it felt like. When I decked into the next view of my perception, it felt like I was on a giant spaceship. It actually looked a lot like the Gravitron ride at carnivals. If you can remember that ride, it looks like a spaceship. It spins really fast. Yeah. You throw yourself up on the wall and there's no gravity. So you can like flip upside down. It felt like I came out of the side of one of those walls and I was on the deck of this spaceship. And there were thousands of other souls there. And everybody was gearing up for their mission to Earth. And in the center, there was this commander, and you can call it Christ or Krishna or Buddha or Source. There was some sort of higher ascended master, higher consciousness in the center, getting us all amped up. And everybody's this beautiful light body, and everybody's cheering and soaring, and nobody can wait to take their jump down to Earth. And then my perception moves to another scene, and everything is happening simultaneously all at the exact same moment. But this is the best way that I can describe it in words. The next scene that I find myself in is I'm in front of this table of beings. It came into my mind's eye like a crappy card table, but there were these people that I didn't know who they were. They never explained to me who they were, but I didn't even have to ask because they were definitely people in charge of something. And I didn't have to question who they were or what their motives were. I knew that they were in charge. They had this big, giant golden book. They were thumbing through it and they were talking to me and they said, okay, we see that you're here for a little while, but you have to get ready to go back. You're not here for long. And I'm like looking around me. I'm like, you guys aren't talking to me, are you? Because I don't know where I am, but it is groovy here and I am definitely staying. And they were looking through the book and they're affirming, no, you're only here for a short minute. You're on your way back. And I transformed into a small child. And I found myself like, yeah, my hands and feet banging on the ground. Like, no, I will not go back. And I remember thinking, you guys don't tell us what Earth is actually like. It's way more challenging than you ever described. And there's no way that I will be returning. And they said, listen, you are not on Earth as a punishment. You just saw that you're part of a spiritual army. You are a spiritual warrior. You're on Earth for the Great Awakening. This is a transformation of consciousness that you signed up to be a part of. And so while you're here, we're going to take you through the details of your pre-birth plan. We're going to show you that you yourself picked every aspect of your life before you went to Earth so that you could accomplish certain things for the mission. So I find my awareness in another scene, and there's this man who presented himself to me, and everything looked a lot like a video game to me. That could be because of the generation that I was born in, or because of the fact that we're living in a simulation. You can take your pick, whatever. So this man presented himself to me. He looked like a video game character, and he was wearing a plaid blazer and a fedora. He had this big empty grocery cart. He was kind of faceless. And then he said, okay, let's do it. Pick your life. And so this big empty grocery cart starts going through these grocery store aisles, and lining the walls of the aisles are these giant cereal boxes. And every cereal box has a life experience on it. So I just start getting all the cereal boxes. I'm like, okay, I'm going to Earth. I'm here for the Great Awakening. Let's transmute some shit. Sorry for cursing. Okay. So I start grabbing all these boxes. And I mean, these are dense experiences, you know, like sexual abuse, drug addiction, prostitution, degradation, homelessness, picking my parents, picking the family line that I would be born into, everything that would go along with that. And then there were also things in the cart that I hadn't gotten to in my life yet, like overcoming and victory and triumph and recovery and being an author and being a speaker and all of these and spiritual awakening. Thank goodness for that life experience, spiritual awakening. But I hadn't gotten to any of those things yet in my life. So they just looked like lovely cart filler. And I just kind of ignored the fact that they were in there. And, you know, one of the moments that really sticks out for me that I think is very, you know, it's worth mentioning is that I picked this cereal box life experience of childhood sexual trauma. And when I picked the box, the soul behind the box, a soul came out with the box. And it was the soul of the man who would molest me as a small child. And I watched the moment when we came into contract with one another and we made this decision to play these roles in each other's lives. And I saw all the reasons why. One of the main reasons why was because I had been his abuser in a previous life in the same capacity. And so we were balancing the life this time. And not only that, but because I perceive that I'm here on a mission for the greater good, for the collective. It was also to transmute collective energy. I don't just heal this part of my story for myself, I heal it for the whole of humanity. So that, you know, that one life experience in particular, I felt like this huge weight had been lifted from me. This was one of the things that I wore as a cloak of victimization throughout my life. Like, oh my goodness, I have to use drugs. I have to be destructive. I have to cause harm because you don't know what it's like to be me. You know, you don't know all of the things that happened to me. I just really immersed in this victim mentality and wearing it as if I was a superhero in it. And so in the moment of being downloaded with this new knowing, it was like 2 tons of bondage and garbage had been released from me. I felt so free and light. And I found myself back in front of the table of beings. And I was expressing so much gratitude. I'm so grateful to have this awareness. I'm so happy to know that there was purpose behind the pain and that I have some role to play. I'm not a victim of my circumstance. I'm a divine co-creator of my experience. That is so amazing. I will still not be returning to Earth, but thank you so much for letting me know. And they just kept shaking their heads and they were like, listen, this is not a punishment. You're not going back as a punishment. You're going back because you signed up for something and we're here to watch you succeed and make sure that you complete it. And I really didn't want to come back. I really, really didn't. My life that I was coming back to was so dark. It was so dirty. And so I told them, I said, well, listen, I cannot go back into her, meaning me, this body. I said, she's glitched. She needs way too much healing. There is no way to accomplish that. They said, okay, well, if you won't go back into her, then we'll show you the baby that you'll be born into. And so they showed me 3 babies and then they zoomed in again, much like a video game, on one avatar. And then they showed me all the stats next to the avatar. The personality profile, the charisma level, the intellect level, the adversity, where she would be born, her gender, her ethnicity, all these things. They showed me all these wonderful things about this little baby. And she was so beautiful, but she was going to have to pick up my grocery cart. And then she had even deeper levels of societal adversity because of the family line that she was going to be born into. And so I thought, okay, if these are my only choices, starting from 0 or going back into the body I just came from, I guess I'll just go back into her. But I kept telling them, there's no way that she's going to be able to heal. Like, she is way far gone. There's no way. And so I found myself sifting back into my awareness. And I just remember them very distinctly saying, trust us, your life won't be nearly as challenging as it was. The first part of your life was boot camp. The second part of your life will be carrying out the mission. You'll be living in awareness now, and you'll have help from us. You'll have all of this supernatural help. We'll send you soulmates and kindred spirits, mentors and teachers. You're going to be okay. Trust us. And I just remember saying, I do not trust you guys. And then I found myself back on my bathroom floor in my awareness, just thinking that the whole thing was drug-induced psychosis, because this was not part of my picture. I was an atheist. I was an orphan to suicide, a drug addict, a prostitute, a liar, manipulator, thief. Spiritual awakening, meeting the creator, being in eternity. This is not part of my picture. So that's my experience in a nutshell.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I was actually going to ask if you had any exposure, or if you had studied any kind of spiritual concepts prior to this. And so you came back. I'm curious about how it was like for you to integrate and how that impacted your addiction. But before we go there, I just want to highlight what you said about the cereal boxes. And I have actually interviewed several past life regressionists, several near-death experiencers, and there's a common theme that I continue to hear, is that if we are choosing to come to earth because we want to experience abandonment, or like you said, sexual trauma, well, there's a soul that says, okay, I love you so much that I'll come and be the person who abandons you, or the person who, you know, traumatizes you or molests you or violates you in whatever capacity. And so I just wanted to highlight that, because I know in my journey, as I own the things that you mentioned, cloak of victimhood. And I spent years in, I'm a victim, nobody understands my life. And as I started to own these things as I chose it, and I've not had an experience like you, but just owning it in this awareness releases so much of that. And so if we even zoom out deeper into that bigger picture of, there's another soul that said, I love you so much, I'm going to come to this planet too, so that you can have that experience. Like, that just changes everything.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And that's exactly what I perceive it to be like. And I had zero spiritual awareness. I had never heard of a chakra. I didn't even know how to pronounce that word for like the first year of being in spiritual awareness. I had never heard of a spiritual awakening. I had never seen sequences of numbers before. I had never had any of the things that come with spiritual awakening now. I had never heard of the Great Awakening. I had never heard of pre-birth planning. So I came from zero, empty, nothing awareness. My life was drugs and debauchery and hedonism and nothing else. I couldn't even speak. Today I have a vocabulary. Today I can string sentences together. I can speak eloquently. 5 years ago, the only words that I said were the long list of drugs that I used and how much money it cost to be with me. I had zero awareness. And that knowing of for me, it's a knowing, the pre-birth planning. But for some people, you can adopt it as a belief. Even if I didn't have this spiritual experience and I had just happened upon the information of pre-birth planning, I would adopt it as a belief. You get to design your belief system. We all do, right? So I love this belief. I love this knowing, because it gives me such a huge amount of freedom. And then even when things go crazy in my current life, I'm like, why would I pick this? What's the lesson? What am I
Right.
looking for here? Like, why do you keep sending me like these terrible people? Like, what is this, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that knowing so
Yeah.
much.
I noticed too, inside of experiences or situations that don't feel good, I I do have an awareness, like, okay, somehow I chose this. So there will be a learning or a gift on the other side, or even actually there have been sometimes lately where I can say, this is the gift. This experience, like, it brings us back to that moment of, we wanted to experience what this felt like. So even though I have a judgment that this feeling is bad or wrong or unpleasant, or I literally can't be in my skin right now because I don't like it that much, there's this, but I wanted it. So maybe I can explore it. Maybe I can check it out and feel it. So, and right on. Yes, the belief. I haven't had that experience, but this is why I'm doing this podcast, because I've heard it so many times after learning about it and reading about it, that, you know, when we hear it enough from all these different perspectives, right? From your perspective, from a near-death experience, from past life regressionists, it's like, when it's coming at all different angles, how can you not accept it as a belief or adopt it as a belief? So I want to switch gears and get into your recovery. I'm curious, and I have heard your story a couple of times, but this part I don't remember. So you came to on the bathroom floor. What was the process of getting sober like?
Yeah. So, well, I wrote the whole thing off as drug induced psychosis. I was like, whoa, I was so high. I thought I was talking to God. That's crazy. And I just kept using because that's all that I knew to do. All I knew to do was just use drugs. So I kept trying to live my life that way. And everything in the universe was blocking me. Everything. So, like, all of these divine synchronicities started happening to get me onto a different path. My path became so narrow. There was no way for me to deter. I kept trying to like go and use, right? I call up my dealer. Hey man, what's up? I need to pick up. Oh, listen, I'm out of the game. I stopped selling. I found Jesus. I want to be a good dad. Bye. Click. Okay, that was weird. I call up the next guy. Same story, but these guys did not know each other. I'm talking like a dozen people. Every single person that I called, all of a sudden in the exact same day, was out of the game. So then I had no way to get substances. And I had a physical dependency to heroin on top of mental addictions to a dozen other drugs.
Mhm.
And I found myself on day 3 of withdrawal and I was so sick. I mean, I was sicker than I had ever been in my 20 plus years of using opiates. And I remember thinking, this is what my parents felt. This is what my parents felt in the pain of their addiction, where they just couldn't go on any longer. They couldn't deal with this pain. And I just wanted it to stop. And I think I had this moment of mental or spiritual suicide when I had that realization, because I remember thinking, damn, I'm so sick that I can't even get up out of bed to figure out a way to kill myself. But if I would have had the strength to do it, maybe I would have, or maybe in some alternate timeline I did. And that's why all of this has happened. So that's like big, that's out there. That's a zoom out perspective.
I follow
So
you all the way out.
yes, yeah.
Don't
So,
worry.
I was laying in my bed and I was so sick and I was crying and it felt like my bones were on fire. Like my skin was made of broken glass and hot and cold sweats, sick from both ends, just like welcoming death. When will it be over? And I heard this voice and it told me that I could request what I wanted fixed. And I was in the throes of desperation. So I was like, okay, strange voice. I would like to no longer be physically dependent on heroin. I didn't say that I wanted to get rid of my drug addiction because I still definitely wanted to use other drugs. I just didn't want to be physically dependent on this one substance. So they told me to lay back and I started to count backwards from 10. And as I went down to 10, these 2 little men appeared in my mind's eye. I can still see them so clearly. They just hang out. Every time I tell the story, they just pop back in. So they had these bulbous noses. They were wearing these white lab coats and they had these lawnmowers that were in front of them. And I watched them take off in different directions and they walked through every crevice of my mind. And as they were plowing through the crevices of my mind, I felt these intense hot tingles every place that they walked. And I just knew that something was happening. And in hindsight, I believe that they were resetting my pain receptors and my neural pathways. And so then as soon as they were finished mapping out my mind, there was this great white flash and I was completely healed in that flash, completely 100 out of day 3 of heroin withdrawal. I mean, if you don't know what that's like, I'm happy for you. It's what they depict in films. It's brutal, ruthless. It's why so many people stay tethered to drugs for so long, because the pain is unbearable. And it's a pain that's not physical, because obviously there's nothing physically wrong with you. It's all inside your mind. Like our minds are so powerful to make me think that there's something physically wrong with me when there actually isn't. And you can take that all the way to the bank. You can use that with any part of your life. So, like in this moment of being like completely well and healed, I threw myself out of bed. I'm crying out to the divine. I'm on my hands and knees. How could this be happening to me? I don't believe in this. You could not have picked a more unworthy person to just bestow this kind of grace on. So after that, I obviously thought that I was the second coming of Christ. I was like, yeah, what's up? Call me Jesus. I started going out on the New York City subway system. and I was proselytizing and evangelizing and laying hands on homeless drug addicts. I was like, I can heal you guys. Okay. I got healed, so I can heal you. I mean, it was total insanity. And I was yelling in people's faces about that McDonald's is poison and the aliens are coming and whatever was going on inside my head. And by the way, I was like a homeless crackhead doing this. I did not look the way that I look now. I look beat up and I was out there acting crazy. So thank goodness for spiritual integration. And I found myself on one of those trains. The train car was completely empty, which is completely bizarre in New York City for no one to be in a train car. And we hit a stop and somebody came into the train and he sat directly across from me. Out of a whole empty train car, he sat directly across from me. And he was wearing a 12-step fellowship necklace around his neck. And I heard a voice and it said, that's your path. You got to follow him to a meeting. Ask him if he's going to a meeting. And so against my better judgment, I did ask him, are you going to a meeting? And he said, yes. And he took me to that meeting. And I've been in recovery ever since. So that was on June 1st, 2019 that I met that man. My awakening happened in March. So this is a good 3 months after my awakening and about 2 weeks after the spontaneous healing. So, you know, things were very chaotic in that small time frame. But once I actually got onto the path of recovery, it started to unfold in a magical, amazing way. The next day I went to another meeting because that's one of the suggestions in 12 steps is to keep yourself in meetings, especially for the first 3 months. And I walked into this women's meeting. And like I said, I didn't look the way that I look now when I went into recovery. There's before and after pictures of me. It's brutal. I was gray. I was super skinny. I was sunken in. My eyes were dead. I was missing most of my teeth. Thank you, recovery and spiritual awakening and source, for letting me buy some teeth in my life today. And, you know, I had picked these huge holes all over my face and my arms because I was completely convinced that bugs lived inside of me. And so I would cut myself open, pick my skin to unrecognizable degrees and burn myself with torches and lighters trying to get the bugs out of me. That's where my addiction took me. That's how crazy I was in the end of my addiction. It wasn't always like that. You know, at one point in time, getting messed up felt fun, but the progression of the dis-ease of addiction and the way that it played out in my storyline, especially, was just so progressive. The last couple of years, especially, it was like my life evaporated. So I walk into this women's meeting and this woman watches me walk through the door and she sees how messed up I look. Obviously, there was no hiding it. And she grabbed me and she whispered in my ear and she said, you are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe. The same message that I heard my dad and my boyfriend tell me in the space of heaven. And I just melted into that woman and I laid my head on her big boobies and I cried and I cried. And this was a great moment of surrender for me. This was me really turning my will and my life over to something bigger than myself. I knew that these things were not coincidence. I knew that there was a movie playing out. I was terrified of the movie. Like, does this really happen? Am I really in a movie? Is it the Truman Show? What's going on? But I knew that whatever I was doing in my life wasn't working and it hadn't been working for a really long time. So at that point I said, I might as well just give recovery a try. And through some more divine signs and synchronicities, I found myself in a long-term therapeutic community, a long-term rehab here in Brooklyn, New York, where I live. I ended up staying there for 17 months. Which is a really long amount of time. But I figured I gave 22 years of my life to drugs. I could probably give a year to recovery. And then by the time I hit a year, I realized I had way more goals that I wanted to accomplish. And it felt comfortable for me to be in an institution at that point in time because I was held accountable. I didn't have to worry about bills or food or clothes or anything like that. And so I was really taken care of. I really was in the care of something greater than myself. And it happened to be this particular rehab. And then from there, you know, my life, I started to manifest my life. I came upon some information about the law of attraction and I thought, let me try this, right? So I started with little things. I said, I'm going to see a blue ball today. And then they would take us out to go play handball with a blue rubber ball, which is something they had never done before. And, I was just like, it was so beautiful. And I thought, oh, well, if I can manifest a blue ball, I could probably manifest a bag of peanuts. And I just kept going real slow like that. And then eventually I manifested schooling for myself. I manifested a job for myself. I have a job in the recovery field today. I work as a peer advocate. So my whole job is just self-disclosure. I say, hey, I'm in recovery. If I can do it, you can do it. And they give me a salary for that. It's crazy.
Right.
And, I manifested a home for myself. I was homeless. I was living inside of a rehab for a year and a half. And, I manifested communities in my life. I found, my footing in my 12-step community that I'm a part of, which is something that I do on a daily basis. I have wonderful spiritual communities. I study A Course in Miracles, which is a metaphysical text channeled by Jesus. I have a wonderful Course in Miracles community. We read the book together. We talk about our interpretations of it. A Course in Miracles is a really dense text. It kind of reads like stereo instructions. When I first picked it up, I thought that it was a handbook for the recently deceased. I was like, oh, this is just like the movie Beetlejuice. This is impossible to understand. I need a caseworker to help me get through it. But my Course in Miracles community is so beautiful. And that's probably the spiritual text that I hold most dear to me after reading.
And
Yeah,
I just need to tell you, okay, so after I overdosed, I had been a part of some spiritual communities that I found after going to treatment for my eating disorder. And I actually only put together 3 months at that time, and I actually went out for another year. But the communities I found were A Course in Miracles and A Way of Mastery. And it was through the Course in Miracles, which I've been doing all the lessons. Like, I'm very deep into the works of A Course in Miracles. I'd love to know about your community, more about that. But it was in those rooms that, in those communities, there were a lot of people who were in 12-step, who were sober. And so I started asking them about, how do you know if you're an alcoholic? Like, how do you know if you're an addict? And they would tell me, well, only you can decide for yourself if that's true for you. And I would get mad. I would be like, I need someone to tell me, am I or am I not? Like, even though there was so much evidence that I didn't really need to ask. But so it was through the course where I actually started asking. I was asking God to disrupt my life enough so that I would stop drinking and doing drugs. And my mind, my sick mind at that time, my distorted mind, thought that, it was going to be like an accident or an injury, so that I would be in bed with pills or another substance, and what happened was I got pregnant. And this was my third. And during my pregnancies, I wouldn't party. I'm not going to lie. I had maybe a couple of glasses of wine throughout my pregnancies, but having a baby inside me there was more motivation to not, drink or use. But it wasn't until on my year birthday that I realized that God gave me the gift of a baby. He didn't hurt me. He did not hurt me. He gave me a gift, like a person, like a human. And so as you're talking about the course, I'm just like, oh my gosh, yes. Like, and I too, I couldn't understand it, but I didn't care because I could feel it. Like, that's all that mattered to me. So please continue.
Oh yeah. No, I will. I'd love to stay on this for a second. I think that it's so beautiful to come into awareness, to realize where source or our guides, our angels have stepped in to pave the way for us. Maybe in the moment we can't see it. I usually can never see it in the moment. But in hindsight, I can see lots of things.
Mhm.
And then I love that. So when I found A Course in Miracles, I had found a bunch of books about the course before I actually got the course, because I didn't have access to the internet or a cell phone for a year and a half when I was in treatment. But every week they would let us go to the library. And so whenever I wanted to go to the library, there was this little section on religion and spirituality. And so I started devouring all those books. And on top of that, I started devouring every sacred text. I read the Bible, I read the Torah, I read the Quran. I wanted to find the thread. I wanted to find, like, where's my thing? Like, where do I fit into all of this? Once I realized that I had a spiritual experience and that I was, in the midst of spiritual awakening. So I read Gabrielle Bernstein's books. She's a wonderful Course in Miracles teacher who's also in recovery. And she kept mentioning the course. And so I thought she wrote it. So I'm at the library. I'm like, Course in Miracles, Gabrielle Bernstein, and like nothing's happening. And so then I just type in the book, nothing's coming up. There's no way to request this book. And so I just started devouring all the books about it. I probably read 15, 20 books about the course. And then one day I was coming back to the facility from being out on an appointment, and that one of the program directors, they search your bags when you come back to make sure that you don't have contraband or whatever. And she saw all my Course in Miracles books. And she said, oh, I have the course at home. I got it 30 years ago. I opened it once. It didn't resonate. I put it back on the shelf. Do you want to borrow it? And I was like, oh my God, yeah. And then she gave it to me. I saw how big it was. And I was like, well, I'm going to be here for a while. So I'm sure she's not too concerned about it. She's not going to ask me for it back in a week because it's a pretty big book. And when I got to the last line, because I just kept reading, even when I didn't understand, I understood a lot of it. The stuff that I didn't understand, though, I just kept reading. I just kept plowing through, kept doing the lessons every day. And when I got to the last word of the text, I really thought that I was going to ascend out of my body. I thought, this is it. This is the handbook for the recently. This is how I get to go back home. Mm-hmm. And I laid back in my bunk bed, and I lived in a bunk bed for 1.5 years. And I took my shoes off and I was like, okay, Source, I'm ready. And I read the last sentence and nothing happened, but I had a lot more information. But, for a long time before integrating the spiritual experience, I thought that it was just about getting back to heaven. How do I get back to that feeling again? How do I experience the oneness again? And through integration, I've realized that it's not about going back to heaven. It's about bringing heaven here. And I get to do that, in situations like this, where we're having a conscious conversation, we're sharing pieces of ourselves vulnerably and authentically with each other. And that feels like the feeling of oneness to me. And so I look for those situations in my life all the time where I can experience true connection with other souls.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you just brought in connection, and I would love to hear your perspective on this. So I got sober in 2013. And right before that, I had stumbled into this community that practiced authentic relating, and they did a couple of different things. So that was also part of my journey to like actually getting sober and getting at least a little bit of time, more than like a month or a few weeks. Cause I quit for many, many times, but it didn't last. It wasn't lasting. I have a plethora of 24-hour chips, like all of it. And so in 2015, I became a facilitator because my awareness around what it feels like to actually be in connection is congruent with one of my favorite quotes, that the antidote to addiction is connection. So I'd love to talk about that for a minute if you've got some stuff to say.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I totally love that. And I have found that to be true. And for me, so connection for me started inside of my long-term rehab. I was trapped inside of a house with 25 other women. And despite what some people might think, that does not equal sexy pajama parties and pillow fights. Okay. It's hardcore. People, it's like 25 people in all different stages of their recovery, acting out of their trauma, acting out of their triggers, acting out of their wounds, myself included. And so I really craved connection, but I just kept separating myself. Like, oh, I'm not like these people. They haven't seen what I've seen. They haven't been through what I've been through, and just making myself so terminally unique that I missed out on lots of opportunities to actually connect. And then when I finally let my self-righteousness aside, after my wonderful program director, this beautiful spiritual mentor in my life, told me like, hey, you know that you're acting on self-sabotage and self-righteousness when you act like this, right? And I didn't even know what self-righteousness was. And so she explained it to me. And so I started to check myself. And I'm a person who's experienced the oneness of humanity in my spiritual experience. How can I not feel it for these 25 women who are all here healing with me? So, I started to really dial that back and really take a look at myself, because it's always stemming from some kind of perception from myself. And I started to try to develop friendships, but I don't know how to be a friend because I've been a drug addict my whole life. I've been a liar, a manipulator, an abuser. So I would try to make friends, I would fail. I would try again, I would fail again. I would try again, I'd fail again. And so when I came into the rooms of 12-step fellowship, or when I was able to actually pick my community instead of the people that were, inside the rehab with me, which I believe were all picked, like predestinedly picked.
Right.
But in the
Like the
moment, I was
cereal
like, can I just
boxes.
get some different people, please? Can I get like one person who gets me? And I did. There was one lady in there who was really into light workers, and she had tarot cards and the whole thing. So then I found my communities, and I put myself in lots of different spaces until I found the people that felt like home for me. So, I mentioned the Course in Miracles community. I went to a dozen Course in Miracles community until I found mine. And mine is not for everybody. The people that I found, they might not resonate for other people. But so I have all these resources for other communities. So then I found this wonderful group of people who study the Baha'i faith. And if you're unfamiliar with that, Baha'i is the world's youngest religion. And it's this beautiful group of people. So the Baha'i faith is about the oneness of religion, the oneness of humanity, and it also believes in all manifestations of God. So from Abraham, Moses, Muhammad, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, and then they have their own prophet, Baha'u'llah, and then their prophet prophesies that there'll be more prophets to come. So I like their literature. I love their scripture so much because it really resonates with me, because it's not about who's right. It's like everybody's right. And it also bridges the gap between science and spirituality. So it's rooted in a lot of metaphysics as well. So all of those things I was like, check, check, check. Yes, yes, yes. And so I have a beautiful Baha'i community. Course in Miracles also takes care of my faith. And then I felt a little disconnected because I had this spiritual experience that I didn't really know a lot about. And so I started looking I set intention. I said, universe, law of attraction, please send me my tribe when it comes to this particular thing. And I came across the Surviving Death docuseries on Netflix. And the first episode is about near-death experiences. And they were at an IANS conference, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. So I Googled it. I found out that they have sharing groups online every week. I started going to the sharing groups, and I heard people speaking a language that I wanted to learn. All of the language that I have from my experience today, I got inside of those sharing groups. And I remember just sitting there crying and saying, like, people were talking about their spiritual experience happening 20 years ago. I was like, what? You haven't got to go home again? What are you talking about? I'm going to be here for 20 more years. I just kept thinking that if I kept doing the next right thing, eventually they would beam me back up,
Right.
So, and then I got so much grounding inside of that group, and I still belong to that community. In fact, now I work part-time for the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I host a podcast for them on their YouTube channel, Ian's Videos. And I coordinate their webinars for them on the virtual platform. So, that has opened up a lot of opportunities for me as well. So the connection between all of these different communities for me has been really finding my soul tribe. I know that I came here with a tribe of people. I saw the thousands of them on the spaceship. I know that we're all here together. And I know that certain ones of us are supposed to run the mission together. And so I have found the members of my soul family, and I remain open-minded to finding more members of them. Mm-hmm. And I do that by putting myself in situations where I feel like I can grow spiritually. So for me, community and connection has been, it has made me the most authentic version of myself. And again, like exercising that spiritual principle of open-mindedness and willingness, I look forward to that continuing to transform. But yeah, I just can't say enough for community. And if anybody's looking for community, please reach out to me. I love like resource brokering for people and just sending you to different places, because I've been in so many of the groups looking for my people that even if my people aren't your people, I probably know where your people are.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so amazing. I love hearing that. And I want to kind of put together a few ideas that you just shared. And I want to make it really, really known that Betty G and I have never, ever, ever talked before this recording. But this is the beauty of the authenticity and the vulnerability that you get when you do step into the rooms of AA. And I did what you did, you know, I mean, I could take your story other than, you know, the actual like journey into heaven and make it mine. I mean, it could fit so easily. And when I got sober, I did what you did. It was like, I am not like these people, you know, and I wasn't ever homeless and I never went to jail. I should have many, many times, but like in hindsight, I can see that was God and that was angels and people looking out for me. But, you know, it was so easy to say, I'm not like that. I'm not like that. I'm not like that. And one of the things that they teach us in the program is to listen for the similarities, take what you like and leave the rest. And once I started to do that, I could connect to the feelings of what was being said, and I got the journeys. And just like right now, it's like there's this connection that is not, we don't even have to like talk about it, or, you know, it's just like we know because because we've been through this kind of experience in our life, and the journey through sobriety, going through the steps, helping others, being in treatment, you know, not being able to connect to anyone because we feel like we're so different. I had to have an intervention in my treatment center. Like the girls sat down and told me, yes, you do have an eating disorder. Like you do belong here. And one of the first things that a woman said to me at my first home group was, we'll love you until you can love yourself. And they gave me a nickname because I was pregnant. They called me Mama Stina. And it was the first time in my whole life that I would go somewhere and people were excited to see me. Like they were happy I was there week after week after week. And I kept waiting for that to change. And it didn't. And it didn't. And so I really have no idea where I was going with all of this, other than I just wanted to like really explode that, because if there's anyone that's listening right now that is struggling with addiction, or even questioning if you have an addiction, or you know you have an addiction, there is a whole world of support and love, and we're waiting for you. And when I first walked into the rooms, I was told as a newcomer that I was a gift, and I did not believe that for a second. But after having a little bit of time, I see that it is the newcomers, and they are such a gift to me. And you know, you're so welcomed. We were so welcomed, and continue to be welcomed.
I love that. And it's, you know, somebody loved me, you know, in fact, when I first went into, I'm in the other fellowship, the one for drug addicts. But you know, like when I first went into the rooms, because this wasn't the first time that I had tried to get, you know, be in recovery. Like when this happened, I had tried lots of times before to stop using drugs, but never with any success, and never even really with any real intention.
Right.
Maybe like a fleeting moment, I'd be like, yeah, I got to get my life together. And then I'd be like, well, this is boring.
Right.
Or whatever I thought. But when I first went into the rooms, it made me recoil. It made me so uncomfortable in my skin to think that people could love me without transaction. That's how wounded and broken I was, that I thought that I had to have sex with you. I had to give you drugs. I had to give you money. I had to give you something to make you love me. But when I went into the rooms at 12-step, they just loved me without anything. In fact, they loved me for being a drug addict. Like, what? That is crazy. You know, like it's the only place where you can go in front of a group of people and be like, I have one day off drugs, and the room erupts in like applause and congratulations and support. And, you know, like it really is a different world. I have some people in my network today that are not in recovery, like in my spiritual communities. And they're like, I wish I had a 12-step fellowship. Like, I wish I had the 12 steps. And you know what? Honestly, there's a 12-step fellowship for everything. I mean, like you name it, there is a 12-step fellowship for it. So if you're looking for community, you could type in like any weird thing that you think you might do in excess, and like it's up there. Like you'll be able to find a community of people. But yeah, you know, like even outside of 12-step, the spiritual communities that I've been able to find and create, you know, I've created my own little community of people, just from, you know, every time I go into a 12-step meeting, I share about a little tiny piece of my spiritual experience, like maybe 5 seconds it's in the story. And And, I call my higher power source. And so I say that when I share, and there's always somebody in the room that's like, oh my God, I call my higher power source too. And so I found all those people, and then we get together with some other people from some other communities. And, I'm really grateful today that I have people in my life. I mean, I cannot explain to you what kind of depraved animal I was before spiritual awakening and before recovery, but it's not the person that's sitting here today. People used to run away from me. People were scared of me. I was a ruthless, abusive, dominant, condescending, manipulative. I was just not a good person, and today I make living amends for all the harm that I caused by being a better person today. There's something I can do about who I was before. I mean, if for me, that person died, but there's still some patterns from her that like linger. And so today I commit to being a better person just a day at a time. Every day I just say, today I'm going to be the best version of myself that I can try to be. And if I mess up throughout the day, that's okay. I got tomorrow to try again.
Yeah, I love that. And, we are all one, and we do need people. Like, whoever you are, whatever you think, however much money you have or you don't have, like that, I think the universe gave me a ton of little opportunities when I first got sober to ask for help. And that was the hardest thing to do because I never asked for help. I had a belief that I had to do everything on my own. And my car broke down and I got fired. Like, I never got fired sober or when I was drinking, only when I got sober. And so there were all these, things that the universe gave to me to ask for help, which helped me see like, yeah, we do need people. And not only that, but like, we are worthy of having those people. Like, I am worthy of having people in my life that do care about me, and I don't have to earn their love, which was huge. So this has been so fascinating. I love this interview. I do have a couple of questions that I ask all my guests, but before we go there, do you have anything that you want to add, say, or share to the world?
No, I'm loving the flow of this. Throw the questions at me. Let's hear it.
Okay. So the first question I have, and I'll use the word source since that's how you address your higher power. How do you define source?
Ooh, well, source is not definable, I don't think. And I wouldn't want to put a limit on source by giving it a definition, but I will say that some of the characteristics of source is unconditional love, acceptance, tolerance, spiritual principles. So for me, that's really what, the divine is just this unconditional love and support. But I don't know if I would define it and put a limit on it. It's everything.
Everything. And the second question is, what would you say is the purpose of life?
We come here to forget so that we can remember. That is the purpose of life. This is a roller coaster that we're on. There's no purpose to a roller coaster. It's just to have an experience, right? It's a video game. There's no prize at the end of the video game. It's just like you got to experience the video game. So that's really what I think the purpose of life is. We come through this veil of forgetfulness when we're born, where we're programmed with other people's belief systems and society's belief systems all throughout our childhood and early adulthood. And then we get to a point where it flips, and then we get to come into our own spiritual awareness and remember who we really are, which is nothing but divine essence of source energy.
So, and the final question is, if you could take one piece of wisdom that you have now and offer it to a younger version of yourself, any younger version of yourself, what would that one piece of wisdom be?
I really am at the point in my life where I'm grateful for, like everything that has happened. And I don't know if I would even bestow any kind of knowledge on any other version of myself, because if I did, I wouldn't have the experience that I have now. But I would say, don't sleep with Chris Morris because he has chlamydia. That's probably what I would say to teenage me.
I love that. Yeah. I know. I love that. I'm in that place too. And the reason I asked the question is because there are bits of great, great advice, but what I continue to hear over and over and over again is that there are no mistakes. None of it has been wrong. Like, your life has not been wrong. My life has not been wrong. So we can like rest in that.
Yep. You know, when I do inner child work now, I come in as like a healed adult version of myself to take care of this little kid. Because, you know, like the younger versions of me, they don't know what's to come. They don't know the depths that addiction will take them. But, you know, I would also not take that experience away from teenage me to be able to numb herself and sedate herself with drugs and alcohol, because she needed that to survive. And I truly believe that with every ounce of my being, that if I didn't have drugs and alcohol in my life, I would have been dead by suicide a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say that I had to create hell on earth to know heaven on earth.
Yep. I love it. It's so true. Alchemy. Hello. We're alchemists here.
Yes. And how do people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Oh yes, please. I love making connections. My handle is Buddha Betty. It's a play on words on all social media, TikTok, which I don't really use. I'm not sure why that one came out first, but YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I also have a coaching business. So if anybody's interested in diving deep into shadow work and kind of uncovering some of those inner wounds that need to be healed, or interested in manifesting your reality, or just transforming any key area of your life, that's something that I do with my time now as well. And yeah, I'm so grateful for this space today. Thank you for creating it. I think it's so important that we create more and more conscious space so that we can make the paranormal normal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a pleasure. I've had so much fun, just like I anticipated we would. And I can't wait to chat with you again. Thank you so much, Betty. It's been such an honor.
Thank you.
I would like to personally thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you haven't already, please be sure to like this episode, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you never miss a beat. And if you really resonated with this content, please share it with all of your friends so that collectively we can expand our consciousness. Have a very blessed week.